Happy birthday, Dad, my daughter Sarah said, hauling my suitcase to the front door of the care facility. Her husband, Ethan, grinned, trying to mask his unease. But when I stepped into the director's office, I saw the expression on his face change instantly. He stood, shock and fear painted across his face. My suitcase, a brown leather one with brass clasps, sat at the door like a foreboding reminder of the past. I stared at it, holding my coffee cup in shaking hands, standing in the kitchen doorway. It was the same one Emily and I had bought for our honeymoon decades ago, though it had not been used since we packed it away after her passing. The zipper was pulled tight, and the corners were bulging with hastily stuffed clothes. A slip of paper jutted from the side pocket, my handwriting, though more unsteady than I remembered. James Williams, Willow Pines Residential Care. Sarah? I called, though I knew she wasn't home. The house echoed my lonely voice. Emily's photo on the mantel caught my eye, her silver frame catching the first light of the morning. She was wearing the green dress she loved on my 60th birthday, the last one we celebrated together. She had insisted on making my favorite apple pie, even though her hands trembled from the illness. "You're spoiling me," I had teased her that day. "That's what husbands do," she laughed, dusting flour from her cheek. The memory hit me like a punch to the chest. Emily would never have allowed this. Whatever this was. Then the phone rang, breaking the silence. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Happy birthday, Dad," she said, her voice too bright, like she was forcing cheer. "We have a very special surprise planned for you. Be ready at 2 o'clock sharp. Sarah, there's a suitcase by the door. Did you pack this?" I asked. The warmth drained from her voice. "Just be ready, Dad. It'll be fine." Her voice became distant, cold, almost like I wasn't even on the line. I held the phone against my ear long after she hung up, feeling as though I were clinging to the last thread of something I used to know. The daughter who used to sit with me, stealing raw pie dough from the counter. My hand shook as I reached for the ingredients in the pantry. Flour, sugar, the jar of apples that Emily had canned herself the last summer before she got sick. I needed something familiar. Something that would keep me grounded. But as I tried to measure out the flour, it scattered across the counter. The sugar bag split, and the sweet crystals crunched beneath my feet. The apples Emily had jarred, rolled across the floor like blood-red beads, making the whole kitchen feel foreign, as though I didn't belong here anymore. I caught my reflection in the window above the sink, 70 years old, silver hair unruly, pajamas wrinkled from a restless night. When had I become this frail stranger? When had my own daughter started treating me like I was already gone? By 1:30, the pie sat cooling on the counter, filling the empty house with the scent of home. I set the table with our wedding china, 3 settings, each perfect and untouched. White plates with gold edges, the ones we saved for special occasions. Cloth napkins, embroidered by Emily herself. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this surprise wasn't what I thought. Maybe it was a party, a celebration, a chance to feel like a family again. Maybe the suitcase was for a weekend getaway, something special. At exactly 2 o'clock, I heard the gravel crunch beneath tires. Through the lace curtains, I saw Sarah's silver SUV pull into the driveway. She sat in the passenger seat, phone in hand. Ethan was driving, his gaze forward, intense. Neither of them looked toward the house where I stood waiting. The pie behind me sat untouched. The suitcase remained packed, with clothes I had never chosen, and something deep in my chest began to crack. I opened the door before they could knock, dish towels still in my hands from the pie preparations. "Hey, Dad," Sarah said, offering a hug that felt rehearsed, barely a touch before she pulled away. Her perfume was strong, and impatience radiated from her. Ethan's handshake was too firm, his eyes scanning past me toward the suitcase. "Ready to go, James?" he asked, His voice clipped. I stood there for a moment, looking at the pie I had baked. Actually, the pie just finished cooling. Emily's recipe. Why don't you both come in? I set the table with the good china. We could have dinner, like we used to. We're already late, Sarah said, her voice sharp, like broken glass. Come on, Dad. We don't have time for this. Ethan had already grabbed the suitcase, lifting it without asking permission, and started toward their car. I watched as they walked toward the SUV, and I felt a heat rise in my face. Late for what exactly? I asked, but neither of them looked back. They placed me in the back seat like I was a child. Ethan's music blared too loud, some electronic beat I couldn't stand. I reached for the dial, but Sarah shot me a quick look through the rearview mirror, her lips pressed tightly together. The sound of the music vibrated through my bones, a constant reminder that they weren't interested in talking, in asking, in acknowledging. We passed through the old part of town, where I used to take Sarah to feed the ducks at the pond. I watched as the familiar landmarks slipped by, places I had shared with my family. Washington Park, where we had spent so many Sundays. The old library, where I had volunteered reading to children. The hardware store where I worked after I retired. Each of these places had stories of their own, stories that seemed irrelevant now, like they belonged to someone else. Remember when we used to come here every Sunday? I asked, leaning forward, trying to make a connection, any connection. MHM, Sarah murmured, her gaze fixed on her phone. She didn't look up. Didn't even acknowledge me. My voice trailed off, swallowed by the hum of the car and the thudding bass. We turned onto unfamiliar roads heading east. Roads I hadn't traveled in years. Roads that led me further from the home I had built, further from everything I knew. Where are we going? I finally asked, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. Ethan glanced at me through the rearview mirror, a thin smile on his lips. Somewhere you'll be much happier, James. Trust us. The word trust tasted bitter on my tongue. When had they started speaking about me instead of to me? When had I become James instead of Dad? Sarah's fingers flew across her phone's screen. I caught a glimpse of her texts, fragments of sentences I couldn't make out, but they were clearly about me. Words like finally and much better this way jumped out, but I didn't say anything. There didn't seem to be a point. 20 minutes later, the building loomed ahead of us. Silver Oaks Residential Care, a modern facility that looked more like a luxury hotel than a place for people like me. The architecture was cold, all steel and glass, meant to impress but not to welcome. Is this a visit? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Sarah turned in her seat, that same artificial cheer back in her voice. Happy birthday, Dad. This is your new home. Her words landed like a physical blow. My chest tightened, and it felt like I had been punched. New home? The cherry pie I had baked sat forgotten in the kitchen. The dining table I had carefully set would remain empty. The suitcase I hadn't packed held clothes I hadn't chosen. My heart sank. We pulled under the covered entrance, and I saw elderly residents in wheelchairs on the covered patio, staring at nothing, their faces blank. A knot formed in my throat as I stared at them, wondering if I would ever be seen as more than just a shadow of a person, waiting for time to take its course. This is temporary, right? I asked, but the question felt small, insignificant in the face of everything that had happened. Sarah didn't look at me as she spoke. Let's just see how you settle in. Temporary, I repeated, trying to convince myself. The house keys were still on my keychain, heavy in my pocket. If this was temporary, why did it feel so permanent? Ethan climbed out of the car, and I could see how practiced his movements were, efficient and detached. Sarah checked her watch again, tapping her foot impatiently. They were treating me like a problem that needed to be solved. I can help with that, I offered, trying to take some control, but Ethan waved me off. "We've got it, James," he said, his tone dismissive. It stung more than I expected. "You just stay put." I watched as they unloaded the suitcase and headed toward the automatic glass doors. The building stood before me, cold and shiny, as if it were a monument to everything I had lost. The life I had known was gone, replaced by this place, this unfamiliar future. "How long will I be here?" I asked as we approached the entrance. I was hoping for an answer that would make sense of all this. A reason. A justification. "Let's just see how you settle in first," Sarah said, avoiding my eyes. The same answer she had given earlier. We reached the door, and Sarah swiped her card, the electronic chime sounding like a bell tolling for my freedom. This was it, the moment that defined the rest of my life. The moment they walked away from me, even if they thought they were doing the right thing. I stepped through the door, feeling as though I had crossed some invisible threshold. I was no longer the man I had been, the father who had built a life. I was just James, an old man who had outlived his usefulness. They didn't look back, didn't wait to see if I would be okay. It was as if they already knew the answer. They led me through the brightly lit halls, their footsteps echoing in the sterile, immaculate space. The walls were lined with modern art and pictures of happy, healthy families, none of which resembled the empty, lifeless look that filled me. I felt like a ghost walking among them, unseen and forgotten. The receptionist, a woman with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, handed me a welcome packet. "We'll get you all settled, Mr. Williams," she said, her voice so smooth it almost felt rehearsed. "James," I corrected, but she didn't seem to hear. It didn't matter. My name was something that had already been forgotten. I had become just another old man in a sea of elderly faces, all waiting for their time to pass. We passed rooms with closed doors, rooms where people sat in wheelchairs or lay in beds, staring vacantly at the walls or the ceiling. Some looked peaceful. Others looked lost. I tried not to meet their eyes, afraid of seeing the reflection of myself in their gazes. "This is your room," Sarah said, finally stopping in front of a door. She unlocked it with a swipe of her card and pushed it open. The room was small, functional, but impersonal. A bed with white linens, a chair by the window, a small dresser, and a desk. There was a photograph of a smiling woman on the wall, a woman I didn't know, yet she seemed more alive in this room than I felt. I stepped inside, my shoes clicking on the polished wooden floor. "It's nice," I muttered, not sure if I was trying to convince them or myself. The silence in the room was heavy, almost oppressive. I had spent my entire life building a home, a life full of memories, and now I was here, stripped of it all. All the photos, the furniture, the little things that made a house a home, they were gone. This sterile space was all that remained. Sarah hovered in the doorway, waiting for me to speak, but I had nothing left to say. I didn't know what was expected of me here. I wasn't ready to be forgotten. Not like this. "Sarah, do you think I'll settle in here?" I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze darted around the room, clearly uncomfortable with the question. Finally, she gave me a smile, but it was thin, insincere. "You'll get used to it, Dad. Everyone does." She paused for a moment, and then added, "We'll come visit soon. Just, try to relax. It's for the best." "For the best," I echoed, tasting the words as they left my mouth. It was a phrase that had been used to justify every decision they'd made for me. For my own good. My mind drifted to the pie that had been left behind, to the table I'd set for dinner, to the empty house that I would never see again. They had taken it all away, and now I was here, a stranger to myself. Ethan stepped into the room, carrying a bag with some toiletries and clothes that had been hastily packed. He placed it on the small dresser with a thud, and I noticed his impatience, the way he seemed eager to leave, to move on with his life. "We've got to get going," he said, glancing at his watch. "We've got plans. Just settle in, and we'll check on you later." I nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure if I could trust my own voice. I wanted to say something, to ask for more time, to tell them that I wasn't ready to be left here like some forgotten relic, but the words wouldn't come. My throat tightened, and I felt small, like a child abandoned in a strange place. I had never felt so alone. "Goodbye, Dad," Sarah said, stepping toward the door. There was no hug this time, no kiss. Just a cold, polite farewell. "We'll see you soon." And then they were gone. I stood in the middle of the room, the door closing behind them with a soft click. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, the rhythm of time ticking away, each second stretching longer than the last. I walked to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn below. The world beyond seemed so distant now, so out of reach. The life I had known, the life I had built, was slipping away, and I was powerless to stop it. My hand shook as I reached for the chair by the window and sat down. It was hard to breathe here, hard to focus on anything other than the heavy weight of my thoughts. I had spent my life working, building, providing, only to be left here like an old machine that no longer served a purpose. But I wasn't ready to be discarded. Not yet. I thought of the life I had left behind, of the years spent with Emily, of raising Sarah, of the home I had made. And I made a decision in that moment. I wasn't going to let them forget me. I wasn't going to let them walk away from everything I had given them. The first few days passed in a blur. The staff here at Willow Pines were kind enough, though their smiles never reached their eyes. There were activities, of course. Bingo, crafts, a walking club, but none of it felt real. None of it felt like life. It all felt like a distraction, something to keep us from remembering who we really were, who we had been. I spent most of my time in that small room, staring out the window, watching the world go by without me. The days blurred into one another, and before I knew it, a week had passed. I heard little from Sarah or Ethan. A brief phone call here and there, their voices so distant, so removed. They said they were busy, that they had work and commitments that kept them from visiting. It was always something. The loneliness, however, was becoming something I couldn't ignore. It gnawed at me, filled the room with its heavy silence. The other residents, most of them unable to remember much of their past, were content to sit in the common areas, chatting with the nurses or watching television. Some had family visit regularly, while others were completely alone, like me. I often wondered what they were thinking, those faces staring into space, or those who would briefly look at me with recognition before the moment passed, and they turned away. One afternoon, after I had finished a solitary lunch in the dining room, I saw something that made my heart skip. It was Sarah's car, parked outside in the lot. I felt a surge of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe they had come to visit, to bring me home, to apologize for everything. Maybe they were going to take me out, show me that they still cared, that I wasn't just a burden to be managed. But when I saw them walking together, hand in hand, I knew something was wrong. Ethan's smile was too wide, too forced, and Sarah's posture was stiff, like she was trying to avoid making eye contact. She spotted me immediately, and her expression faltered for just a second before she composed herself. The moment passed quickly. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice flat, too practiced. "We were just in the area and thought we'd stop by." "Thought you'd stop by?" I repeated, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "It's been over a week, Sarah. I haven't heard from you. I haven't seen you." She hesitated, her eyes flickering to Ethan, who seemed eager to keep the conversation moving. "You know how it is, Dad. We're busy with work and everything. It's just been hard to find the time. Hard to find the time, I muttered. The words hit me like stones, heavy and sharp. Is that what this is now? You come by when it's convenient for you, and then leave when you've had enough? That's not fair, Dad, she snapped, her voice rising. You're not the only one with a busy life. We're trying to make everything work. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, standing up, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. I understand that you don't want me here, that I'm just an inconvenience. But I'm not ready to be forgotten. I'm not ready to be left behind. For a long moment, no one said anything. The tension in the room was thick, palpable, like we were all holding our breath. Ethan shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable, but not saying a word. Sarah's eyes flickered away, guilt, perhaps, or maybe frustration. It was hard to tell. I came here for a reason, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. And I'm not going to sit quietly while you make decisions for me. I won't be pushed aside like this. Sarah looked at me, her eyes narrowing. Dad, we've talked about this. You're here because it's what's best for you. You're not in any condition to live on your own anymore. Best for me? I asked, taking a step toward her. This is what you think is best for me? Putting me in a place like this, away from everything I know? This isn't a home, Sarah. This is a waiting room for the end of my life. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's face flushed red, and Ethan looked at the floor, unsure of what to do. But I was past the point of caring about their discomfort. My voice was steady now, fueled by something I hadn't felt in weeks, anger, but also clarity. I've spent my life taking care of you. I've spent my life working, providing, and now you're telling me that I'm a burden? I shook my head, my hands trembling. I don't need your pity. I need respect. I need to be seen, not just tolerated. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away, her expression hardening. You're right, she said, her voice barely audible. We don't know what it's like for you. But it's not easy for us either. I stared at her for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking in. They didn't know what it was like for me. But they didn't know what it was like for me either. We're trying, she said softly, looking down at her hands. We really are. I looked at Ethan, who was still standing quietly in the background. I could see now that he wasn't interested in this fight. He wasn't interested in my pain. He was just here because Sarah had asked him to be. Well, trying isn't enough, I said. And I'm not going to sit here waiting for you to figure it out. I want to go home, Sarah. I want to go home. The words hung in the air like a challenge, like a promise. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for them to tell me what to do. I was telling them what I wanted. The silence after I spoke was unbearable. Sarah stood frozen, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, looking like she didn't know whether to respond with anger or guilt. Ethan shifted on his feet, his eyes darting nervously between the two of us, but he didn't say a word. I understand that you think this is what's best, I continued, my voice quieter now, but no less firm. But I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready to be a stranger in my own life. Sarah took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the effort to keep herself composed. Dad, this is for your safety. We can't keep doing this. You don't remember things sometimes. You forget things. What if something happens to you? What if? What if nothing? I cut in, my frustration bubbling over. You think I don't know that? I know what's happening to me. I've been living with it every day. But I'm still here. I'm still me. The words hung in the air like a challenge, daring her to refute them. Sarah's eyes softened, but she didn't relent. It's just hard for us, Dad. We're trying to balance everything. But you need more care than we can give you, and I can't keep pretending it's not affecting our lives. I swallowed the lump in my throat, trying to stay calm, trying to hold onto the thread of dignity I had left. You never asked me what I needed. You just made a decision. You and Ethan. For me. Without me. Her face hardened, and I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She wanted to argue, but I could see the weight of the situation pulling her down too. I don't know what else to do, she said softly, her voice cracking. You're not the same. You're not the man you used to be. That's not true, I said, shaking my head. I'm still here. I'm still your father. You may not see it, but I still have my thoughts, my memories, my life. Ethan finally spoke up, his tone a little more forceful than I expected. James, we're just trying to make sure you're safe. We're doing what we think is best. I don't need your protection, I retorted, feeling a surge of anger. I need my family. I need you to see me, to remember who I am. Ethan didn't reply. Instead, he stepped back, his hands in his pockets, seemingly unsure of how to handle the situation. It was clear that he had no real stake in this conversation, that he was just here to support Sarah's decisions. For a moment, I let the silence wash over us. It was painful, but necessary. I was tired of pretending that everything was okay, tired of being the passive participant in my own life. Sarah, I said after a long pause, my voice much softer now. I don't want to be here. I want to go home. I want to be with my memories, my things, in the house I've lived in for so long. I don't want to be in a place like this, waiting for the end to come. Her face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes again. I could see the conflict in her expression, the love she had for me, but also the frustration, the worry, the weight of the responsibility she felt. She had spent so much of her life trying to please everyone else, to make things work, that she had forgotten how to just be with me, her father. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know what you want from me. I walked over to her slowly, my legs feeling heavier with each step. I had to do something to remind her of who we were before all this. I want you to remember me, I said quietly, reaching out to touch her arm. I want you to see the man who raised you, the man who loved you, not the burden you think I've become. I'm not gone yet, Sarah. But if you keep treating me like this, I will be. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. I never meant for any of this to happen, she sobbed. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to help. I thought this was the best way. I know, I whispered, pulling her into a hug, my own chest tightening with emotion. But this isn't the way, Sarah. Not for me. Not for us. She stood there in my arms for a moment, stiff at first, unsure of what to do, before finally leaning into the hug, letting the weight of the situation settle between us. I could feel the tension slowly ease from her body, but I knew it wasn't over. It couldn't be. Ethan cleared his throat, and I pulled back, releasing Sarah from the embrace. His expression was unreadable, but I could see the frustration bubbling beneath his calm exterior. Maybe we should go, he said, his voice flat. Sarah wiped her eyes and nodded, her face pale. Yeah, I think it's time. She turned to me, her eyes softer now, but still filled with that uncertainty. We'll talk soon, okay? We'll figure this out. I nodded slowly, but I didn't believe her. I didn't believe them. This wasn't something that could be figured out in a few conversations. This wasn't something that could be solved with promises and polite visits. I wasn't some problem to be fixed. I was her father, and I needed to be seen. Goodbye, Dad, she said, her voice quieter this time. She kissed me lightly on the cheek, and Ethan followed her, his steps heavy, his gaze distant. And just like that, they were gone again. I watched them walk down the hallway, their backs to me, and for the first time since I had arrived here, I felt a glimmer of something deep inside. A sense of defiance. A promise to myself. I wasn't going to let them forget me. I wasn't going to fade away quietly. I would make them see me again. I would go home. The days following Sarah and Ethan's visit were a blur of inactivity and frustration. The room was still as empty as the space in my chest where a sense of belonging used to reside. I spent my time pacing the small area of my room, sitting in the chair by the window, watching the world go by, but never truly feeling like I was a part of it. The staff at Willow Pines were polite enough, but their attentiveness seemed more mechanical than compassionate. They would check on me periodically, ask if I needed anything, and leave quickly as if they had a million other tasks to attend to. It was clear to me that I wasn't the only one here who had been forgotten. I wasn't the only one whose family had moved on without them. One afternoon, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I could feel myself growing weaker, not physically, but emotionally. It was like my soul was slowly being chipped away, piece by piece. If I didn't do something soon, I was afraid I'd lose the will to fight altogether. I picked up the phone by my bed, the one that sat and used most of the time, its silent receiver a constant reminder that no one was calling. My fingers hovered over the number I had dialed countless times before, but this time it felt different. This time, I was calling not for help, but for a way out. I punched in the numbers, my heart pounding as I listened to the phone ring. It was Sarah's phone, and after the third ring, she picked up. "Dad?" she said, her voice hesitant, cautious. She was probably expecting me to ask for something, probably expecting me to ask her to come visit. But this time, I wasn't asking for anything. This time, I was taking control. "I need to talk to you," I said firmly. "Now!" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Dad, I told you, I can't come right now. I'm in the middle of something important." "Something more important than your father?" I shot back, my voice rising despite myself. "I need you to come here." "I'm not asking. I'm telling you." Her voice faltered. "I don't understand. What's going on?" "I'm going home," I said, my words coming out in a rush. "I can't stay here anymore. I don't belong here, Sarah. I won't let you and Ethan keep making decisions for me. I'm coming home, and I expect you to be there when I do." I could hear her struggling for words. "Dad, you can't just leave. It's not safe for you. You need the care you need." "I need my life back," I interrupted, my pulse quickening. "I need my home, Sarah. I need my dignity. And I'm coming to take it back." There was another long pause. I could almost hear her trying to decide if she should fight me on this, or if she should just give in. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be there," she said, the words heavy with resignation. "But you have to understand, this is harder than you think." "I understand more than you think," I said, my voice softening. "I just want you to understand that I'm still your father. I'm not gone yet." The line went silent, and I sat back in the chair, staring out at the sky. The clouds were gathering, and I could feel the storm brewing inside me, too. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I had some control over my life. This wasn't how it was supposed to be, but it was the way I was going to make it. That evening, I heard the faint sound of tires crunching against gravel. I didn't even have to look out the window to know who it was. Sarah's silver SUV had returned, and this time, I wasn't waiting for her to tell me what was best for me. This time, I was waiting for her to see me. Really see me. I opened the door just as she stepped out of the car. She looked different, more tired than when I had last seen her. Her shoulders were slumped, her eyes weary. I saw Ethan in the passenger seat, his gaze directed straight ahead, as if he couldn't bear to meet my eyes. "Are you ready to go?" Sarah asked, her voice quiet, but there was a hard edge to it now. She was trying to remain calm, trying to keep control of the situation. But I could see the cracks forming. I nodded, and without a word, I turned and grabbed my bag, pulling it toward the door. "Don't you think this is a little hasty?" she asked, clearly frustrated now. "You can't just leave, Dad. There are so many things we need to talk about." "We've talked enough," I said firmly. "You don't need to tell me what's best for me. I'm going home." She didn't argue after that. Instead, she sighed, her shoulders sagging in defeat. "Fine," she said softly. "But you know I'm just trying to make sure you're okay." "I know," I said. "But being here isn't making me okay. Let's go!" With one last look at Willow Pines, I stepped out the door and into the unknown. The life I had left behind was waiting for me. I wasn't going to let it slip away without a fight. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me again. The drive back felt surreal. I was sitting in the back of Sarah's SUV, the hum of the engine a dull backdrop to the storm brewing inside me. The road stretched out ahead, familiar in its landmarks, but unfamiliar in the sense of what I was about to return to. It felt like I was going to reclaim something I didn't know I had lost. But I wasn't sure if going home was a victory or a desperate grasp at something I could never have again. Sarah and Ethan were silent, the tension thick between us. Ethan had barely spoken since he'd gotten in the car, his hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. Sarah had her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her eyes fixed straight ahead. She wasn't angry. She was worried, that much was clear, but her worry felt more like a weight I couldn't bear to have on me anymore. The house I had spent years building, brick by brick, memory by memory, came into view as we turned the corner. I hadn't seen it in weeks, and I could already feel my pulse quicken, like a part of me was finally coming back to life. The old oak tree in the front yard still stood tall, its branches stretching wide like arms ready to embrace me. The porch swing still creaked in the wind, like it had on so many summer evenings when Emily and I would sit and watch the sunset together. "Here we are," Sarah said softly, pulling into the driveway. Her voice had lost its edge, but the silence between us was still deafening. I opened the door before she had a chance to park, stepping out into the yard and inhaling deeply. The air was thick with the scent of freshly mowed grass, the same smell that had filled this space for years. I walked toward the porch without looking back. I didn't need to look at them. I needed to feel the familiar ground beneath my feet, to remind myself of who I was, who I had been before everything had gone so wrong. "Dad, wait!" Sarah called after me, her footsteps hurrying to catch up. "Please, we need to talk about this." I didn't stop. "There's nothing more to talk about," I said, my voice steady, but my heart racing. "I'm home." The door creaked as I pushed it open. The familiar warmth of the house greeted me, a stark contrast to the cold, sterile feeling of Willow Pines. The living room was just as I remembered, Emily's favorite vase still sitting on the mantel, the same picture frames on the wall, the old leather couch where we used to sit together. "How long do you think this is going to last?" Ethan's voice broke through the stillness. He stood in the doorway, watching me closely, like he was waiting for me to collapse or break down. "You can't stay here forever, James. You need help." I turned to face him, my hands clenched at my sides. "I don't need help. I need my life back. I'm not going to sit in some place and wait to die while you two make decisions for me." Sarah looked torn, like she wanted to say something but didn't know what. She stood by the door, her arms folded once more. "We just want to make sure you're safe. That's all. But we can't keep pretending everything is fine." "Everything is fine," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It was fine until you decided it wasn't." For a long moment, no one spoke. I looked around the room, taking in the small details that made it mine. Emily's knitting needles on the coffee table, the books we used to read together, the worn-out rug that had seen so many family gatherings. It felt like nothing had changed. And in that moment, I realized that maybe I had been the one to change. Not in the way they had thought, not in the way I had feared, but in the way that truly mattered. I wasn't going to let them decide who I was anymore. I walked past them and into the kitchen, pulling open the fridge, reaching for the bottle of whiskey I had left unopened since Emily passed. I didn't drink much anymore, but I needed a sense of normal. I poured myself a glass, my hand steady as I brought the cool liquid to my lips. The taste of it was sharp, familiar, grounding. "Maybe I was wrong," Sarah said finally, her voice soft. "Maybe I should have listened. Maybe I should have let you try to figure this out on your own." I turned to face her, surprised by the honesty in her words. But I wasn't ready to accept her apology, not yet. "It's not too late," I said, setting the glass down. "But you need to understand something. I'm still here. I still have a life to live. I'm not going to sit in the background, waiting for you to decide for me. If you can't see that, then we have a bigger problem than you think." Sarah swallowed, her eyes wet with unshed tears. "I don't know how to fix this, Dad, but I will try. That's all I need," I said, my voice steady but kind. "Just try." I watched as she walked slowly toward me, her hand outstretched. She reached for me, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself embrace her, just for a moment. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. "Let's just take this one step at a time," I whispered. The sun was setting outside, casting golden light across the room. The house felt like home again. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. But for tonight, I was here, in my house, with my family, however fractured we had become. And that was enough.